Welcome to Live Daf, your online Daf Yomi shir.
Shalom and welcome to today's Daf Yomi, Brachos, Daf Yudal, Duran Yud Gimel Amud Beis, 7 lines from the bottom. Uwe Prokim Shoyel. Rameh taught us in the Mishnah that one who is in the middle of reciting Krishma or the Brachos, he can only interrupt, he can only be mafsik for specific purposes. If he is be'emtza, if he's in the middle of a section, then he can be mafsik to be shoyel mipnei hayira umeshiv, in order to inquire regarding the well-being of a person who he has fear for, umeshiv, and he can respond to this person's greeting as well. But prakim, if he's between sections, that is more lenient. He can be shoyel mipnei hakavod umeshiv. He can inquire as to the well-being of a person who he honors, umeshiv, and he can respond to this person's greeting as well. Says the Gemara, meshiv machmas mai. When Rameh says he's allowed to respond, who is he responding to? If you'll say that meshiv is referring back to the same individual that he was allowed to extend the greeting to, he was allowed to be shoyel pnei hakavod, and he's also allowed to respond to this person. Says the Gemara, hashta mishal shoyel. If he's allowed to extend the greeting, to initiate shalom to this person, certainly adur mibaye. Do you need to teach us that he's allowed to respond to this person? It is self-evident. If you can initiate a greeting to this person on account of his honor, certainly you may respond to him and not ignore him. So there's no need for the Mishnah to teach us this halacha. Says the Gemara, Ella, but rather, what meshiv means is a different thing. Shoyel pnei hakavod. He can extend a greeting to one who he honors. Umeshiv, what does umeshiv mean? Umeshiv shalom l'chal adam. He can respond to any person who comes and greets him. If so, ema seifa, let's carry over to the latter part of the Mishnah. Ube'emtza, if he's in the middle of a section, what is the halacha then? Shoyel pnei hayira umeshiv. He can inquire, he can initiate shalom to a person who he fears. Umeshiv, he can respond as well. What does umeshiv mean there? Meshiv machmas mai, who is he responding to? Ilema pnei hayira, if he's responding to this same individual who he's allowed to initiate a greeting to, mipnei hayira, on account of fear, he can respond to this person's greeting as well. Is that what the Mishnah means? Again, the same kasha, hashta mishal shoyel. If he's allowed to extend and initiate a greeting to this person, adurim mibayi, do you need to teach me that he's allowed to respond to this person's greeting? Ella, you must say that what does umeshiv mean? It means mipnei hakavod. He's allowed to initiate to a person who he fears, and he's allowed to respond to a person who he merely honors. If this is the correct presentation of Rameh's opinion, if so, Hainu Rav Yehuda, it's a mirror image of Rav Yehuda's shita. It's exactly the same opinion, and the Mishnah presents them as two opposing views. The Snan, as we find in the Mishnah, Rav Yehuda Omer, be'emtza shoyel pnei hayira umeshiv pnei hakavod. In the middle of a section, you can initiate on account of fear and respond on account of honor. Ubeprakim, in between the sections, shoyel pnei hakavod. He can initiate on account of kavod. Umeshiv shalom l'chal adam. He can respond to any person's greeting. So this is the exact replica of Rameh's shita according to our presentation. Says the Gemara, you must interpret it differently. We have to insert some words into the Mishnah. This is what Rameh meant to say. Prakim, in between the sections, shoyel pnei hakavod, he can initiate a greeting to one who he honors, and certainly, of course, he can respond to this person. So, even though it's not a chiddush, it's not really teaching us a new lesson, it is self-evident, but nevertheless, Rameh elaborates on it. Continues the Gemara, ube'emtza, in the middle of a section, shoyel pnei hayira ve'ein tzorach lo mashu meshiv. Certainly, he can respond to this person. So in conclusion, Rameh is telling us that be'emtza, in the middle of a section, he could offer as well as respond to a greeting mipnei hayira. But prakim, in between sections, he can offer and initiate a greeting and respond to one who he honors. Divrei Rameh, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, be'emtza, in the middle of a section, shoyel pnei hayira, he can initiate a greeting to one who he fears. Umeshiv pnei hakavod. He could even respond to one who he merely has covet for, because according to Rabbi Yehuda, responding is more lenient than initiating. Ubeprakim, in between the sections, shoyel pnei hakavod, he can offer a greeting on account of one's honor. Umeshiv shalom l'chal adam, he can respond to any person's greeting. Tani nami hachi, we have a brisa that presents these shitas exactly as we did. Hakari Shema upaga by Rabbi. In the middle of Shema, he encounters his Rebbe, his teacher, a gadol himenu, one who's greater than him. What is the halacha? But prakim, in between sections, shoyel pnei hakavod. He can inquire as to the person's welfare If it is somebody who he honors, and certainly he could respond to this person's greeting. However, in the middle of a section, he can initiate only to somebody who he fears, and certainly he could respond to this person's greeting. So this is the view of Rameir, concurring with our interpretation previously stated. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, be'emtza, in the middle of a section, he can inquire on account of yira, and he can respond on account of honor, or a prakim, in between the sections, he can inquire on account of kavod, he can respond to anyone's greeting. So in summary, Rameir Shita is that be'emtza, he can be shoyel b'pnei yira umeshiv, but prakim he can be shoyel b'nei kavod umeshiv. Rabbi Yehuda holds be'emtza, he can be shoyel b'nei yira, and meshiv b'pnei kavod, and be'prakim he can be shoyel b'nei kavod, umeshiv shalom l'chol adam. Now, regarding practical halacha l'maaseh, the Mishnah Berurah brings that although the halacha follows the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that one may interrupt in the middle of a perek in order to respond to kaddish or kedusha, which constitute b'pnei kavod on account of Hashem's honor, nevertheless, it is our custom, our minhag, not to interrupt in order to greet an individual or to respond to his greeting. I recently read a incident involving Rav Moshe Feinstein, who was in his Beis Medrash in the middle of Ma'ariv, and he was in the middle of reciting Krishma, when a Rebbe, a teacher, entered the Beis Medrash, not realizing that davening was underway. He approached Rav Moshe to greet him, and Rav Moshe did not respond to his greeting. The man turned around, realizing that what was going on. He turned around, he left, and he went up to his classroom, which was on the 3rd floor. A couple of minutes later, there was a knock on the door. It was Rav Moshe himself coming to offer his profuse apologies on account of having ignored him. And he said the following. He said, although, according to the strict halacha, I could have responded to your greeting, however, I didn't want to break the accepted minhag, the accepted custom, and therefore I did not respond to your greeting. And now he proceeded to greet him warmly, to converse with him, and then left. Continues the Gemara. There was somebody named Achi, who was the teacher of the Brachos in the Beis Medrash of Rav Chia. He inquired of Rav Chia regarding the following question, the following situation. Hallel of a Megillah ma'al sheyafsik. If somebody's in the middle of reciting Hallel or reading the Megillah, ma'al sheyafsik, may he interrupt there as well, just as he's allowed to interrupt during Krishma for specific reasons? Do we say that during Hallel and Megillah, this halacha will apply as well? We derive it from a kavachayma from Krishma. Certainly, if Krishma deiraisa paisik, if in the middle of reciting Krishma, which is a biblical obligation, is a deiraisa, one is allowed to interrupt for specific reasons. Certainly, Hallel d'Rabbanan mibaye, of course, Hallel, which is a mere rabbinic obligation, certainly he's allowed to be mafsik. Oidilma, perhaps, Hallel and Megillah are more stringent than Krishma. Why? Persumin is adif. Since Hallel and Megillah involve the publicizing the miracles of Hashem, therefore they are more superior, and one may not interrupt during their recitation under any circumstances. Amalei Rav Chia responded, Paisik, he may respond, he may interrupt during the recitation of Hallel Megillah. It is similar to Krishma. It is not more stringent. Paisik ve'ein b'kachlum. Amarabba. It depends what type of Hallel we're referring to. Those days of the year, those 18 days of the year where it is incumbent upon every individual to complete the entire Hallel, being perik leperik paisik, b'emtza perik eni paisik. There's a difference between middle of a section and between sections, just as we find by Krishma. The Hallel recited on those days assumes a greater stringency and has the same status as Krishma. However, v'yomim she'ein ha'yochad goymer is Hallel, those days where it is not obligatory for an individual to complete the entire Hallel, afilu be'emtza perik paisik, he's allowed to interrupt even in the middle of a perik to inquire as to the well-being of one who he honors or fears. So the recitation on those days doesn't have the same status as the days where one is required to be goymer as Hallel. Says the Gemara, Eini, is that the case that one may interrupt in the middle of Hallel? V'har Rav Shava, ikla l'gabei Ravina. Rav Shava came in to visit Ravina, and it was days v'yom she'en yochad goymer Hallel hava. It was one of those days where the Yachid is not obligated to complete the entire Hallel, and Ravina was in the middle of reciting Hallel. Nevertheless, he did not acknowledge Rav Shava, Rav Shava. He did not interrupt in the middle of Hallel to acknowledge him, to greet him. Why did he do that? If it was days that Eina Yochad Goyim Hallel, one may interrupt in order to offer a greeting, even be'emtza perik. Says the Gemara, Shani Rav Shava de Lechoshav le Ravina. Rav Shava wasn't greater than Ravina. He wasn't held in high esteem in Ravina's eyes. He wasn't considered greater than him, and therefore there was no reason to be mafsin to interrupt. It did not constitute Pnei HaKavod. Continues the Gemara. Boi minei Ashyan. His name was Ashan. He was the Tana de Rav Ami. He was the Tana who taught Brachos in the Mitzvah of Rav Ami. He asked Rav Ami the following question: Hashari b'tanis, one who is in the middle of fasting, mao shiyitim, can he merely taste the food without swallowing it? Do we say achila v'shtiya kavalei? He has accepted upon himself to refrain from actually eating and drinking b'haleka. Merely tasting and then spitting out is not considered to be eating and drinking, and therefore it's permitted. Idilma perhaps. Hano kavalei. He accepted upon himself to refrain from benefiting from food, from having anah, from oichel, and therefore va'ika, in this case, although he is spitting it out, since he is enjoying the food, it is aser. Omar lei, so he responded to him, toyim ve'imkach klum, since he is only tasting the food, that is permitted. Tesis points out, this is a heter, an allowance only regarding a tainus that a person accepts upon himself, but not regarding a tainus tzibur, a communal fasting. Tanya Mihachu, we find a similar brisa that merely tasting something without swallowing does not require even a bracha. Evidently, it's not considered to be achila v'shtiya. Mat emes, a woman is allowed to taste the food to see if it needs some more seasoning, and being that she's not swallowing it, eino tuna bracha, she's not required to make a blessing. Similarly, one who is in the middle of fasting, he can taste, and there's no concern. Ad kama, how much? What is the share that a person couldn't taste and it be permitted during a tainus and not require a bracha? Rav Amir Rasi Tami Achir V'yasa. They tasted up until the shir Revi'as Halug, but more than that is already considered to be hanas achila. It is akin to eating and drinking, and would not be permitted during a tainus and would require making a bracha. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Kol hanosein shalom l'chaveru kodim sheyispalel. One who offers greeting to his friend prior to davening, that is not the proper way to do things. Kilo asoi bama. It is compared to having made his friend into an altar, into a bama, an improper mizbeach. Why is that? Says the Maharsha, since davening nowadays is considered like an avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, like the service of the Beis Hamikdash, like being makar korban on the mizbeach, that is meant to be done first. When this individual precedes it by offering his friend shalom, he was machshav his friend, he holds his friend in higher regard and considered to be more important than his avodah, than his tefillah, and therefore it's as though he created a new bama, a new mizbeach, which competes with the proper true mizbeach. Shanamar chidu lachem min adam, refrain from approaching a person who merely has breath in his nostrils. Ki bama nechshavhu. The pasuk actually says bameh nechshavhu. What is he considered? Why do you give him such high regard? And we say al tikri bameh. Don't read bameh. Ela bama. Read the word as it would say bama. It is considered to be a bama, an inappropriate mizbeach, since he is doing this prior to davening. Ushmol Amar. Let's read the pasuk literally the way we have it. Bameh chashavti lezeh. Let's read it the way we have it. Bameh nechshav, which means with what? Why did you hold this person in such high esteem? Bameh chashavti lezeh v'lo eleha. Why did you give this person priority over going to daven to Hashem? Maser Rav Sheshes. We seem to find a halacha which indicates otherwise, which teaches us that it is permitted to greet one prior to davening, as we see in our Mishnah. Vaprakim, in between the sections of Kriya Shema which precede Tefillah, shoyel pnei hakavod u'meishiv, one can offer a greeting on account of one's honor and respond. So we see that it is okay, it's permitted to offer a greeting to somebody even prior to davening. Tirgim Rav Acha interprets the halacha of Rav, which prohibits one from offering a greeting prior to davening in a very strict circumstance. One is not allowed to go to one's door, meaning you're not allowed to go to his home and go there to offer greeting. That you cannot do. That shows that you're holding your friend in higher esteem than the concept of davening to Hashem. However, if you have a chance encounter with somebody, then it is permitted to offer and to respond to the person's greeting. Omar Rav Ida bar Avin, Omar Rav Yitzchak bar Ashen. Also, one cannot go about doing his own business prior to davening. Shenemar tzedek lefanav yahalech. One should first involve himself in tzedek and righteousness. That is tefillah, which makes a person righteous in front of Hashem. And then only then, if yosem l'derech ba'amav, he should place his footsteps on the road, meaning he should go about conducting his business. V'amar Rav bar Abba Rav Yitzchak bar Ashian. Kol mispalel v'achakach yetzel l'derech. One who davens prior to embarking on his trip, HaKadosh Baruch Hu oisa l'chafotzav, Hashem will fulfill his needs and help him out. Shenemar tzedek lefanav yahalech. One who first involves himself in tzedek and tefillah, then afterwards v'yosem l'derech pa'amav, Hashem will help his footsteps on the road that he will be traveling on. V'amar Rav Yoiner Rav Zera, kol alon shivas yomim b'lech halayim. One who 7 days pass him without him having experienced any sort of dream, Nikra, he's called wicked. Shenemar v'saveya yolin b'yipakidra. The pasuk says, one who is satiated and sleeps, he will not encounter any ra. Says the Gemara, I'll take you saveya, don't read saveya, satiated, ela sheva, rather 7 days. That if 7 days had passed without him being visited, bal yipakid, without him having experienced any sort of dreams, any sort of messages from above, he's called a ra, he's called wicked. One who satiates himself with the Torah and then, only then goes to sleep. They did not inform him bad tidings. Shenemar v'saveya yolan. One who is satiated with the Torah, he will not have encounters with bad things, he will not experience bad dreams. Now, what is the point of a person who didn't have dreams for 7 days? Why is he called wicked? It is merely an indication that evidently they are not connecting to him from heaven. They're not sending him messages. They're not communicating to him, and it is an indication that something is wrong. So in conclusion, we had several discussions in Al-Gemara. Firstly, regarding Hallel and Megillah, may one interrupt, be mafsik in the middle of Hallel and Megillah? And the answer was yes. The second question was regarding being tayyim, merely tasting food without swallowing during a tainus, and the answer was that it is permitted. In fact, it doesn't require a bracha. And then the Gemara moved on to the halacha of greeting one before davening, that is not permitted. And finally, one is not allowed to involve himself in his own personal activities prior to davening. One must first involve himself in tzedek and righteousness, and afterwards go about his personal activities, and he will merit success on that account. Says the Gemara, Elu ein ben aprokim. Amar Rav Yochanan. Halacha Rav Yehuda. The halacha follows Rav Yehuda's shita. The Amar bein alikeichem le'emes v'yatzev le'yafsik. One may not interrupt between alikeichem, the third parsha of Krishma, and the Brachos Krishma, which follows Krishma, emes v'yatzev. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yochanan. My time, Rav Yehuda. Why can he not be mafsik then? Why is it not considered to be in between the sections? Bein aprokim. The chsiv, as we find in the pasuk combines Hashem's name with emes, and therefore is meant to go together, and meant not to have any interruption in between. Hashem Elokeichem emes. Hashem regarded as truth, is emes, as the absolute truth, as Rambam explains. Only Hashem is the Murchar Chametzias, is the absolute truth, who is totally independent and not dependent on anything or anybody else. That is absolute truth, and therefore we find in the pasuk the word Hashem together with emes. We are not meant to be mafsik, to interrupt between the two things. Says the Gemara, what if a person needed to be mafsik? Does he need to repeat again the word emes? Choyzer v'emes emes, or eine choyzer v'emes emes. According to the Shittas Rabbanan, that one may be mafsik between Hashem Elokeichem and emes. So this person was mafsik. Or even according to Rav Yehuda, if he needed to wait around, he was mafsik not by speaking, but merely by letting time pass. Does he need to repeat the word emes? Why? Why should he need to do so? Because emes is really also the beginning of emes v'yatzev. It's the beginning of the bracha which follows Krishma. So, since he already said Hashem Elokeichem emes, and then needed to interrupt, perhaps the emes that he already said, that is referred back to Krishma. But now he needs to repeat emes again in order to begin the Brachos Krishma of emes v'yatzev. Ask the Gemara, choyzer v'emes emes, or yein choyzer v'emes emes? Does he need to repeat or not? Amar Ravo or Rav Yochanan, choyzer v'emes emes. He needs to say it again. Amar Rabba, Rabba Amar, Einei Choyzer v'Oimei Emes. He doesn't need to repeat it. Hahu denachas kamei de Rabba. There was a Chazan Shlich Tzibur who davened in the presence of Rabba. Shami Rabba de Amar Emes Emes Trei Zimni. He repeated Emes twice. Amar Rabba kol Emes Emes Tafsi Lahai. This habit of reciting Emes many times has seized this person. It is not the way we're meant to daven. Continues the Gemara. Amar Rav Yosef. Kama ma'ali hashmaitza. How noble, how great is the following halacha. The Chi'asar of Shmuel Bar Yehuda. Omar, he said, Amri b'marava. In Eretz Yisrael, they used to say the following halacha. Arvis, during Tfilas Arvis, there is no real obligation to discuss Mitzvah Tzitzis, which is included in the third Parsha. Therefore, they used to do an abridged version of Parshat Tzitzis. They used to begin with Daber el b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim, and then hop over to the end of the Parsha, Ani Hashem Elokeichem, which discusses Yetzias Mitzrayim up until Emes. So they did an abridged version of Parsha Shema, the beginning and the end. Why was it so special? Why was he praising this custom? The Mefarshim explains, since we know one is not meant to divide a Parsha on our own, if it was something that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't divide. Kol psuka de lepaske Moshe, aman lepaskinan. We don't divide something which wasn't divided by Moshe Rabbeinu. So how then did they go ahead and divide? Did they make their own version of Parshas Tzitzis? So the answer is that these words of Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim, Hashem Ani Hashem Elokeichem, we find an exact replica of these words in a pasuk in the Torah in Parshas Achir Mos. So therefore, technically speaking, they didn't create their own pasuk. These words, this version, is actually a replica of an existing pasuk. Therefore, there was no problem of anan lepaskinan, of dividing a parsha. So therefore, it was ma'alya, it was praised on an account that it conforms with this halacha. So, in conclusion, the minhag of the Dmei Arava was not to recite the complete Parshat Tzitzis, but rather just the beginning and the end, in order to mention Yetzias Mitzrayim, even Baris. Amalei Abaye Mai Mal Yusa. What is so great about this custom? Va'amar Rav Kahana Amar Rav Lo Yaschel. One doesn't need to recite Parshas Tzitzis, Parshas Vayomer altogether during Krishna Shalarvis, but once he begins, he must complete. You can't stop in the middle. If you'll say V'amarta Aleim, that merely saying the words V'amarta Aleim, like the Bnei Arava did, V'layav Haschala, does not constitute a Haschala, is not considered as if they began the Parsha, does not require one to proceed and say the whole Parsha. V'amar of Shmuel Rav Yisrael Rav, Daber b'nei Yisrael lo yav haschala. The beginning, just the words Daber b'nei Yisrael, does not constitute a haschala, does not require one to complete the parsha. However, v'amar taleim, once he proceeds further and says Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim, that is already have gone too far. That's already the beginning of the discussion of tzitzis. Havi haschala is considered to be a haschala of the parsha, and he cannot stop there. He must complete the entire parsha. So how do we understand, how do you explain the custom of the Bnei Arava, who merely began the parsha by saying Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim, and then continued over and skipped over the rest till the end of Ani Hashem Elokeichem? Says the Gemara, this exactly is the machlekes. The Bnei Arava held that merely saying the opening portion of Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim does not constitute a proper haschala and does not require one to continue. One may skip over to the end. Says the Gemara, Marv Papa Kasavi Marava. Indeed, the Bnei Marava held, their opinion was that even once you have advanced that far and recited the words of Amarta Aleim, it does not constitute the Haschala, and he may skip over till the end. A Haschala is only if it proceeds into the description of tzitzis. Ad the Omar Aslam tzitzis. But if he has not gone that far, he may skip over to the end. So we have a machlekes here. What is considered to be a haschala of Parshat Tzitzis? According to one sheet in the Gemara, according to Rav, as soon as he says Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim, he should speak to them, he should dictate to them. That already is considered having begun the Parshat of Tzitzis, and he must continue and complete it in its entirety. According to the Bnei Arava, however, they held that having said merely Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amar taleim and not having said V'oslam Tzitzis, that is not considered to be a haschala of this Parsha, and he may skip over to the end and conclude with Yetzias Mitzrayim. Concludes the Gemara, Amar Abaye Hilkach. Therefore, Anan, our minhag is Aschulim Aschalinan. we don't disregard the Parsha of Tzitzit in its entirety. We start saying the Parsha, the Kamaskil Ma'arava, just as the Bnei Ma'arava did, but now we have to continue. V'kiva and Aschilin, and once we've begun and we've said Davar Bnei Yisrael Marta Aleim Migmar Nami Gamrinan, then we need to conclude and we need to be going the entire Parsha without skipping, in accordance with the Shita of Rav. Damarav Kana Marav Lo Yaschel. He doesn't need to begin, he doesn't need to recite Parshas Tzitzis, but once he begins, then he needs to conclude. Therefore, we have both stringencies. Since we begin like the Bnei Marava, we must conclude in its entirety in accordance with the Shita of Rav, who considers it to be an haschala, and we are not allowed to skip anymore. Continues the Gemara. Chiv Rav Amar. Omar Hashem Lekechem. If one chooses to say Ani Hashem Lekechem, meaning to recite the Parsha of Tzitzis, then Tzorach Leima Emes, then of course he needs to continue on and say the bracha of Emes V'Yatziv, Emes V'Amuna, which follows Krishma. Lo Omar Ani Hashem Lekechem. However, if he chose not to say the Parsha of Tzitzis, which includes mention of Yitzias Mitzrayim in Tzorach Leima Emes, then he doesn't need to say the blessing following Krishma as well. Says the Gemara, 1 second, we know there's an obligation to mention Yitzias Mitzrayim even during the evenings. What is this person going to do? V'boilet kuri Yitzias Mitzrayim. What about mentioning Yitzias Mitzrayim, which is required even at night? Says the Gemara, he will say a different version of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Damar hachi moedim anachnu lach Hashem Elokeinu she'titzanu Eretz Mitzrayim. We praise you, we thank you for taking us out of Eretz Mitzrayim, of Tisanu and Beis Avadim, and for redeeming us from the house of slavery. V'asisa lanu nisim, and you did for us miracles, ugvuris al hayam, and you showed us your strength on the sea, on the Yam Suf. V'sharnu lach, and we sang to you. And as Rashi says, he continues after that by saying, Mikamecha bekel Hashem, Malchus Charabanecha Tilgal Yisrael Nashkivenu, as we do today. So, according to the Shita of Rechi Barav, one is not required to say Parshat Tzitzit altogether, nor is he required to say Emes V'Amuna. How is he going to fulfill his obligation of Zecher Yitzias Mitzrayim? By saying this Nusach of Moedim Nachnu Lach, which includes mention of the Nisim of Yitzias Mitzrayim. So, in conclusion, we have several shittis regarding Parshat Tzitzit at night. According to Bnei Arava, one is meant to do as follows. He's meant to begin saying Davar Bnei Yisrael Marta Aleim, and concludes with Ani Hashem Lekechem, mentioning Yitzias Mitzrayim, and he omits the middle of the parsha. He begins from the beginning of Vayomer, skips the middle, and concludes with the end. According to Rav, which was mentioned earlier, Rav Shmuel Bar Yitzchak Amar Rav, he holds that once you've gone that far, you've gone to Vamarta Aleim, you cannot skip anymore. The only way you can skip is if you only say Daber Bnei Yisrael, you say Vayomer Hashem Daber Bnei Yisrael, and at that point, it is not considered to be a proper haschala of the parsha. We barely mentioned a few words, and therefore he can skip over to the ending of that parsha. According to our custom, Abaye says, Anan, our custom is to actually say the entire parsha. Once we begin and we go till Vamarta Aleim, we cannot skip anymore, and we must recite the entire parsha. In conclusion, was Chir Bar Rav Shita, which was that it is discretionary. A person can choose yes or not to say the parsha of Shema. If he chooses not to, then he must say a different nusach, a different lashon of Moedim Anachnu Lach Hashem, which includes mention of the miracles of Yitzias Mitzrayim. Continues the Gemara, Omar Rabbi Shua ben Karcha, Lama Kadma Parsha Shema. The Mishnah provides us an explanation for the sequence of the Parshas of Shema, why they were placed in this particular order. Continues the Gemara, Tanya of Linton Brachos. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai Omer. Shimon ben Yochai will present us with another explanation. Bedinhu, it is logical, Sheyagdim Shema Levahim Shemaya, that first we should recite Shema, and only then followed by Vahim Shemaya. Why? Shezeh Lilmoid, because Shema contains reference to learning Torah, V'zeh Lilamed, and Vahim Shemaya contains a reference to teaching Torah. Now, in order for a person to teach Torah, he first needs to learn Torah. So that's why Shema comes before Vahim Shemaya. How about Vahim Shemaya to Vayomer? Vahim Shemaya to Vayomer. That is because Shezeh Lilamed, because Vahim Shemaya contains reference to teaching Torah, V'zeh Laslis, and Vayomer contains Maaseh Mitzvah. The act of doing a mitzvah is describing the mitzvah of tzitzis, and therefore mitzvahs are on a lower level than learning Torah, and therefore is placed after the Parshat of Shema and Shemaya, which concern themselves with learning and teaching Torah. Says the Gemara, how could you say that Shema contains learning, Vayim Shemaya contains teaching, and Vayomer contains the act of doing mitzvahs? Atu, is that so that Shema, the first Parsha Shema, Lilmoid Ispei, it only contains mention of learning, Lamed Velasis Lespe, it doesn't include anything regarding teaching and actually doing mitzvahs? V'oksiv, it clearly says, V'shinantam, you should teach Torah, Ukshartam, Uchsavtam, you should wear tefillin, place the mezuzah by your doorpost. So evidently, even Shema includes all three elements of learning, teaching, and performing mitzvahs. V'su, and another kasha, V'hoim Shemaya, regarding the second parsha, you said, Lamed, it has a reference to teaching. Lamed the Ispei, it only contains Lamed, but not Velasis, Velasis Lespe. V'oksiv, it says in the second parsha, Ukshartam Uchsavtam, which is a reference to Maasa Mitzvahs. So how can you say that Shema only has learning and nothing else, but Shema only has teaching and nothing else? That is not so. Ella, but rather we must interpret Rav Shimon Rechai's words differently. Hochikam, this is what he meant to say. Bedinu, it is logical. Shetiktim Shema levayim Shemaya. Why does Shema precede vayim Shemaya? Shezeh, because Shema indeed contains all three elements: Lilmoid, learning, Laramed, and teaching, Velasis, and performing mitzvahs. So that's why it comes first. Vayim Shemaya levayomer. Why does vayim Shemaya precede vayomer? Shezeh, because the parsha of Shemaya contains two elements: Yesh bo lelamed velasis, teaching and doing. However, vayomer ein bo elalasis bavad. It merely contains doing, and therefore this is the explanation for the hierarchy. Shema contains all three elements, comes first. Vayim Shemaya only contains two, comes second. Vayomer contains only one, that's why it comes third. Says the Gemara, why is this explanation necessary? But typically, the Shuman Korcha, we already have a good explanation in the Mishnah why the Chachamim established the parshas in this manner. Why do we need another explanation? Says the Gemara, yes indeed, Chadavoid Kamar, we have one good reason, and now we're coming to add another one. Chada, the first reason is that Shema comes first, Kedei, in order to Kabul of Oil Machal Shemaim Tchila, so one accepts upon himself the kingship of heaven first, and proceeds to the next parsha of Hayim Shemaya, V'achar Kach Kabul of Oil Mitzvahs, which contain the commitment to doing Hashem's mitzvahs. So this was the explanation given in the Mishnah. V'oid, and another reason, in the name of Mishum Rechai, which is Mishum de Isba Hanemili Achrunaisa, because they contain all these various elements, as we mentioned, and hence the hierarchy. So in conclusion, we have two reasons, two explanations for the sequence for the Seder Parashas. According to Rav Shimon Korcha, first, one is meant to be makabel of oil machal shemaim tchila, to accept upon oneself the yoke of Hashem kingship, and therefore Shema comes first, followed by Vayim Shemaya, which contains all mitzvahs, followed by Vayomer, which discusses tzitzis, which applies only by day, and therefore is a very limited parsha, and comes last. According to Shema Rechai, the reason is as follows: Shema contains all three elements: learning, teaching, and doing mitzvahs, therefore it comes first, followed by Vayim Shemaya, which contains only two of those elements, teaching and performance of mitzvahs, followed by Vayomer, which only contains one element of doing mitzvahs, and therefore it is placed last. Continues the Gemara. Rav, there was once a story regarding Rav. Moshe Yadi, he woke up, he washed his hands, Vikara Krishma, he recited Krishma, and only then, V'anach Tefillin, V'tzali, he put on his Tefillin, he davened. Says the Gemara, how could Rav follow this sequence? Rav seems to indicate that the proper way of doing things is first Krishma, and only then putting on Tefillin. We have a Brisa, which instructs us to conduct ourselves in the reverse. First, you're meant to put on your Tefillin, and while wearing Tefillin, you're meant to recite Krishma. V'atani, we've learned in the Brisa as follows: one who is in the middle of digging a burial chamber for a mace, he's involved in a mitzvah, and therefore he's oisek b'mitzvah, and therefore exempt from performing other mitzvahs. Pater mi Krishma, uminat tefillah, uminat tefillin, umikol mitzvahs ha'amros b'Torah. He's pater from all the mitzvahs in the Torah. Continues the Brisa, he gives man Krishma. When the time for reciting Krishma arrives, he ascends from his work, washes his hands, he puts on tefillin, he recites Krishma and he davens. So the Brisa clearly indicates that the proper sequence is first you put on your tefillin, and then, only then, you recite Krishma, which is in contradiction to Rav's practice. So that's the obvious kasha. And before we get to that, first the Gemara will analyze the seeming contradiction which we find in the words of the Brisa. Hagofa kasha, this is a self-contradiction. Reisha Amar Potter, V'Sefer Amar Chai. In the Reisha you said that one who's involved in digging a grave is Potter from mitzvahs on account of it being Oiseg mitzvah. Then in the latter part of the Brisa, you say, as soon as Zman Krishma arrives, he must come up and perform all the mitzvahs. This is a self-contradiction. Says the Gemara, like Kasha, it is not difficult. They are both speaking about different incidents. Sefer B'Trei, V'Reisha B'Chad. This latter part of the Brisa, which obligates him to perform the mitzvah, is speaking about when there are two people working as a team. Since they are rotating between themselves, so certainly when one is on break, he should go ahead and do the mitzvahs, since he's not delaying the procedure in any way. However, Reisha, the Reisha that exempts him, is speaking about an individual working on his own. In that case, he should not stop his mitzvah, since stopping from his digging would delay the grave from being dug, and therefore he is patur, he's a mitzvah, and patur min mitzvah. So that explains the Brisa. It is not a contradiction. However, in any event, this is a kasha on Rav. Mekom kasha l'Rav, who did things in the reverse. He first recited Krishma and then put on Tefillin. The Brisa states one is meant to first put on Tefillin and only then say Krishma. Says the Gemara, certainly Rav has found another shita. Rav follows the opinion of a different Tana, who indeed holds that that is the proper way of doing things. Rav Kershuban Karchas relay. He holds like Shuman Karcha. The Amar, who taught us in the Mishnah, regarding the sequence of the recital of the Parshat of Shema. First you say Shema, the first Parsha which contains Oil Machal Shamayim, and only then you follow by saying Shemaya, which contains all mitzvahs. So we see that the acceptance of Machal Shamayim precedes all mitzvahs. Similarly, Rav held that one is meant to first recite the entire Krishma, which symbolizes the acceptance of Machal Shamayim, and only then proceed to mitzvahs and put on tefillin. Says the Gemara, Rav Kirshum and Karchas relay the Amar. Oil Machal Shamayim Tchila, first comes Oil Machal Shamayim, Vachech Oil Mitzvahs, and only then the commitment to doing mitzvahs, and therefore first he recited Shema, and then performed the mitzvah, and according to the Shita of Rav Shimon Karcha. Says the Gemara, how can we compare the two things? Amor, the Amar Rav Shimon Karcha. Rav Shimon Karcha only said his halacha, lahaktim kriya to explain why we proceed one recital to the other. However, lahaktim kriya lasir mishamasle, how do we find? What do we see that this concept will apply regarding reciting Krishma prior to a Masa mitzvah? You can't compare reading to reading and doing. Who says we can compare the two things? How do you know that Shimon Karcha will hold that the proper sequence of events regarding Shema versus Tefillin is first to say Shema and then Tefillin? Perhaps regarding a Masa mitzvah, his rationale will not apply. Says the Gemara, V'su, and in addition, we find that Rav himself did otherwise. He first would put on Tefillin and only then recite Krishma. V'su misava like Shimon Karcha. Does Rav then follow this opinion? First comes Machal Shamayim, first comes Krishma, and then Tefillin. We find otherwise. Va'amar Rab Chia Bar Ashi Zimnin Sagin. Many times the Rav, I was present in front of Rav. Magdim Umashiyade, he would get up and wash his hands. Umavarich, and say the Brachos HaTorah. Maslam Pirka, and he would teach us the Gemara. Umanach Tefillin, he would put on Tefillin, and only then Va'ada Kar Krishma, only then after he's already put on his Tefillin, he would recite Krishma. So you see very clearly that Rav himself would do it in the reverse. He would first put on Krishma, first put on Tefillin, and then recite Krishma. So this seems to contradict Rav's Shita. How could you say that Rav follows Rav Shimon Karcha, that first comes Machal Shamayim, first comes Krishma, and then Tefillin? We see that Rav himself did otherwise. Says the Gemara B'chitema, perhaps you can suggest that really Rav holds one is meant to first say Krishma and then Tefillin, like in the first story. Why did Rav do it in the reverse in this case? Simply because there was a technical problem. It was still prior to the arrival of the Zman Krishma. He could not recite Krishma yet, and therefore he chose to do it in the reverse. First, put on Tefillin. He wasn't going to refrain from putting on Tefillin and doing a mitzvah. So he put on the Tefillin, and only when Zman Krishma arrives does he recite Krishma. But in reality, he holds that the proper way to do things, if it is already the Zman Krishma, one is meant to first say Krishma, which is Machal Shamayim, and only then put on Tefillin. If that's the explanation, if it's merely a technical, it's a product of a circumstance that required him to do it in this manner, so what was Rav Chia Bar Ashi coming to teach us? He related many times, I've witnessed the following incident where Rav used to do things in this way. Apparently he's coming to teach us something. According to your explanation, it's merely a product of a circumstance, but in reality, ideally one is not meant to do so. Says the Gemara, yes, It was a product of circumstance. Ideally, one is meant to say Krishma and then put on tefillin. In this case, he couldn't do it that way because Zman Krishma hasn't arrived yet. But it's merely a technical situation. So then what was the chiddush of Rashi? What lesson was he coming to teach us by relating to us this incident? He was coming to teach us a different halacha. He was coming to rule out the shita, the opinion that holds that one is not required to recite Brachos Torah upon learning Mishnayos or Gemara. So that's what Rashi is going to teach us. We see that Rav conducted himself otherwise. When he got ready to teach us Mishnayos and Gemara, he did indeed recite Brachos Torah. Again, inside Lafuki, it's coming to rule out the Omar from the shita that holds LeMishnah Ein Tzarich Levarich. For Mishnah, and they had the Gershel Mishnah Talmud, for Mishnah and Gemara, one is not required to make Brachos Torah. Kamashmalan. So he informs us that that is not so. The Afla Mishnah, even regarding Mishnah and Gemara, not Mitzarech Levarich, one is required to make Brachos Torah, as we see regarding these incidents of Rav, where he was makpid, he was particular to say Brachos Torah prior to teaching us the Mishnah and Gemara. Okay, so that explains why Rav did it in this manner. Why did Rav first put on his tefillin and only then say Krishma? So we explained because the Zman Krishma has yet to arrive, and therefore he couldn't say Krishma prior to tefillin, so he put on his tefillin, and when Krishma arrived, he recited Krishma. So in conclusion, it is still a kasha on Rav, because let's go back to our initial question. We had two kashas. We related a story where Rav first recited Krishma and then put on tefillin. This seemed to be a contradiction to the Brisa, which indicated that one is meant to do things otherwise. That was the first kasha. Then the Gemara said, perhaps he's following the shita of Shema and Karcha. Then we voided that suggestion by saying that we can't compare Rav Shema and Karcha to Rav. Then we went on to ask another kasha that we seem to find the contradiction within Rav himself, where Rav conducted himself otherwise. We answered that. We said, fine, that's a product of circumstance. Really, ideally, one should recite Krishma first and then put on tefillin. But if it's still not the time of Krishma, then he may put on his tefillin and then Krishma. Fine, so that was answered. But what is the source of Rav? Doesn't Rav contradict the first brisa? Mekom the Rav Kasha, the brisa of Achayfa Kuch Lameis, which tells us that one is meant to first put on tefillin and then the Krishma, contradicts Rav's custom. Says the Gemara, Shlucho the Avis. It was also a product of circumstance where the Shliach or the messenger messed things up and he brought the tefillin very late. And ideally, Rav would have put on his tefillin prior to saying Krishma. That was his custom. However, this was a particular situation where the Shliach hasn't arrived at the tefillin and had already come Zman Krishma. Rav didn't want to miss the opportunity to recite Krishma, and therefore, rather than lose his Zman Krishma, he recited the Krishma, although he wasn't wearing tefillin yet, and only later on did he put on his tefillin. But ideally, one is really meant to first put on his tefillin, and while he's wearing his tefillin, recite Krishma. As we see in the next Gemara, Amar Ula, Kalakir Krishma B'lay tefillin, one who recites Krishma without tefillin, since Krishma contains mention of the mitzvah of tefillin. So when one is reading Krishma, he's reciting the words of tefillin, but he's not actually practicing what he is saying. Kilu meid edu sheker ba'atzmai. It is as if he is providing false testimony on himself because he's saying something and he's not keeping it. It is compared to kilu hikriv oila b'lei mincha, like one who brings a carbon oila but does not supplement it with the mincha, which is a requirement for the oila. V'zevach b'lei nesachim, brings the carbon without the wine, without the additional requirements. He has fulfilled merely a partial mitzvah. So too here, in the case where one recites Krishma without tefillin, it's a partial mitzvah. Ideally, one is meant to wear tefillin and only then say Krishma, which contains reference to the tefillin that he is wearing, and that is considered to be a full-fledged, proper mitzvah.